The afternoon sun burned over Ouagadougou. Traffic roared, dust swirled, horns screamed. An old bus rattled down the road packed with tired faces. Inside, sweat-dripped children cried, and a faint smell of gasoline spread ignored by everyone. Then came a spark. Smoke curled from the engine passengers' panicked doors jammed. And in the chaos, a blind woman was left behind, until Ibrahim Traoré appeared. The first scream cut through the street. Flames erupted beneath the bus, roaring up the sides like hungry beasts. Passengers panicked instantly. They shoved, clawed, and slammed their fists against the jammed doors. Glass shattered, sending shards across the aisle. Thick smoke rolled in burning eyes, choking throats. Mothers clutched their children. Men pushed forward. The bus shook with terror louder than the fire itself. Outside, people froze in shock. The heat pushed them back. Phones rose into the air, recording, not rescuing. The fire hissed, spat, and grew. And then above the chaos came a voice. It wasn't a child. It wasn't a cry for family. It was the trembling voice of a woman. Her hands searched blindly in the dark smoke her cane lost under trampling feet. She stumbled, reaching for help that never came. Her hair singed sparks catching the edge of her dress. Her coughs turned ragged. She was seconds from collapse. A blind woman. Alone. Forgotten inside a burning bus. Across the street, a convoy slowed. Doors opened. A tall figure stepped out, dust clinging to his boots, his uniform still marked with sweat. His eyes locked on the inferno. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. The flames cracked like gunfire. The crowd screamed at him, "Stay back, it will explode." But his eyes had already found her. The blind woman, fumbling, suffocating, abandoned. And then he ran. Straight into the fire. Guards shouted, one grabbed his arm. He broke free. The smoke swallowed him whole. For a moment, he vanished. Inside, she fell to her knees. Her body shook violently, lungs fighting for air. Her fingers clawed the floor. Tears mixed with ash on her face. Then suddenly another hand gripped hers, firm, unshaking, alive. A voice pierced through the crackle of fire. "Hold on, you're safe now," she gasped. I can't see." "You don't need to," he said, voice steady. "Just trust me." With one swift motion, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, but her fear was heavy. The flames roared around them, sparks stinging his face. Step by step, he carried her toward the shattered doorway. His breath was sharp, but his stride never broke. And then he emerged. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, some wept. Phones trembled as they captured the moment, their leader body blackened with soot, carrying a blind woman out of the fire. For her, it was survival. For him, it was duty. For the world watching it was a miracle born in flames. Before we continue with this unbelievable rescue, I'd love to know, where are you watching this video from? And what time is it right now? Comment below. I can't wait to read your answers. She lay on the ground, coughing, her body trembling. Paramedics rushed forward with water blankets and oxygen, but Ibrahim stayed by her side, one hand gripping her shoulder. "Breathe," he urged softly. "You're safe." The blind woman shook her head. "Safe." The word felt foreign, almost cruel. Tears streaked down her soot-covered face. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "No. I was left there. No one saw me." Her voice cracked. "I was invisible." The crowd grew silent. Her words, faint but raw, carried heavier than the smoke. Ibrahim leaned closer. "Tell me your name." She hesitated, then whispered, "Awa." She clutched the edge of the blanket as though it might anchor her to the earth. And then the story spilled out. Years ago, she was a teacher in a small village. Her classroom was bright with chalk and laughter. She loved letters, numbers, the rhythm of children reciting together. But a car accident on a rainy night stole her sight forever. Her husband, already fragile with illness, could not bear the weight. Within a year, he was gone. She swallowed hard, voice unsteady. My only son, he promised to stay. He said he'd never leave. Her breath hitched, but poverty pushes harder than love. One morning, he packed his bag and left for the city. He never came back. Gasps spread through the onlookers. Awa's hands twisted in her lap. She spoke slowly, each word cutting deeper. I begged for work. No school would hire a blind teacher, so I sold trinkets on the street. I learned the corners by counting steps. I listened for engines, for footsteps, for coins dropped in my hand. Her voice lowered, fragile as a whisper in the wind. But today, no one listened. No one touched me. I thought, this was the end. She turned her head slightly toward Ibrahim, though her eyes saw nothing but darkness. When the fire came, I prayed, not for my life, but for anyone to notice I still existed. The silence was suffocating. Even the crowd that once shouted now stood frozen, their phones lowered their throats tight. And then came the knife to the heart. Her words, simple and sharp, cut through every soul watching. Years ago, I taught children to read the letter A. Today I was left to die without even a hand to guide me. Her voice broke. She wept openly, her thin shoulders shaking. Ibrahim's chest tightened, his jaw set. He remembered his own childhood, walking barefoot miles to school, often invisible in his own way. He remembered the teacher who once gave him food, who shielded him from bullies, who made him believe he could rise. And now, before him stood another forgotten teacher. He took Awa's hand, firm and steady. You are not invisible, he said. His voice was low, but it carried. You will not be forgotten. Not while I stand here. The crowd stirred. Some wiped their eyes. Others murmured. A few stepped forward, shame burning in their faces for having done nothing while she burned. Awa trembled, whispering, Why would you save me? Ibrahim did not hesitate. Because once someone saved me. And if I turn away from you now, I am no leader at all. The moment hung heavy, electric. The smell of smoke still lingered, but now it mixed with something else. A sense that this was not just survival, it was the beginning of something larger. As night fell over Ouagadougou, the fire truck sprayed the last embers into silence. But in the hearts of those who stood there, another fire burned, a fire of shame, of compassion, of awakening. For Awa, the blind woman, it was not the end she expected. It was the first time in years that someone had truly seen her. The crowd thought it was over. The blind woman was safe. The flames had been challenged, but the bus was still burning, each window glowing like the mouth of a furnace. Ibrahim looked back. The smoke rose higher, curling into the sky like a warning. He should have turned away. Any man would, but his ears caught something the others missed. A faint sound, a child's cry. At first it was almost swallowed by the roar of fire, but it was there, soft, broken, desperate. Someone was still inside. No. A guard shouted, grabbing his arm. Excellency, the bus will explode. Another voice from the crowd echoed, Leave it. No one can survive in there. But Ibrahim's eyes hardened. He tore free from the grip. His boots struck the ground with finality. And without another word, he ran straight back into the inferno. The crowd gasped, some crying out, some cursing. Phones shook as people tried to film their voices trembling. He's going back. He's inside again. The flames screamed louder. The windows shattered one after another. The roof sagged, threatening to collapse. The air was thick with ash, suffocating heavy. Inside, the bus was hell itself. Ibrahim pulled his scarf over his mouth, his eyes narrowing against the smoke. He pushed forward, heat blistering his skin, each breath a battle. Seats burned, metal groaned, sparks rained from above. And then through the smoke, he saw him. A boy, curled against the floor, small hands covering his head. Unconscious. Ibrahim's chest clenched. He dropped to his knees, crawling through fire, his arms shielding his face from sparks. Reaching the child, he pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck. A pulse, weak but alive. With no time to think, he scooped the boy into his arms. The child's skin was hot, his breath shallow. Every second counted. But the path back was worse than before. The fire closed in from both sides. The aisle was blocked by a fallen seat flames chewing through its fabric. Ibrahim lowered his shoulder, kicked hard, and forced a way through. The roof groaned again, a beam crashing down inches behind him. The impact shook the floor. The heat seared. Still he moved. One step, another. The boy pressed against his chest, silent, fragile. At last, light. Through the smoke, the shattered doorway appeared. The crowd outside screamed his name. Ibrahim, with a final surge, he broke through the smoke, stumbling into daylight. The boy limp in his arms. The crowd erupted. Women screamed, men shouted, tears streaming down faces. Phones captured every second. Firefighters rushed forward, spraying water, clearing space. Ibrahim knelt on the ground, laying the boy down gently. A paramedic checked quickly. Then, he's breathing. He's alive. Cheers tore through the crowd. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed. Others wept openly, unable to believe what they had witnessed. Ibrahim's face was blackened with soot, his hair damp with sweat, his hands raw from heat. But his eyes burned brighter than the flames. He whispered almost to himself, but loud enough for all to hear. He once carried me. Now I carry him. The word struck deep. A reminder. A vow. And as the boy was lifted onto a stretcher, the crowd surged forward, not with phones, not with fear, but with awe for a man who had entered the fire not once but twice to prove no life is too small to save. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of water against fire. Then came the applause, thunderous, endless. What began as tragedy had become something else, a vision of courage, of sacrifice, of humanity, burning brighter than flames. The fire was out, but the night was not over. Sirens wailed as ambulances carried the injured through the streets of Ouagadougou. Ibrahim Traoré followed closely, riding in the same vehicle as Awa, the blind woman, and the little boy he had carried from the flames. Their breaths were shallow, their bodies weak. But they were alive. The convoy reached the hospital gates. Floodlights bathed the building in harsh white. Nurses rushed to the entrance. For a moment, it looked as if the help had finally arrived. Then came the words. Cold, bureaucratic, final. No insurance cards. They cannot be admitted. The guard's voice cut like a knife. The paramedic blinked, stunned. These people just survived a fire. They need oxygen treatment. The hospital administrator stepped forward, his clipboard clutched like a weapon. I'm sorry, but rules are rules. Without proper documentation, we cannot use resources. Beds are full, medicines are limited. They must go elsewhere. The words hit the crowd like ice water. Gasps, murmurs, anger bubbling. Awa's trembling hand gripped Ibrahim's sleeve. I knew it, she whispered. I was never meant to live. For a moment, Ibrahim stood still. His chest rose and fell, his face unreadable. But his eyes burned hotter than the fire he had just escaped. He stepped forward, his boots striking the concrete with thunder. The crowd hushed. Even the administrator faltered under his gaze. Ibrahim's voice was low at first, but sharp as steel. Are you telling me that a blind woman pulled from fire and a boy carried from death will be turned away because of paperwork? The administrator swallowed, sweat beading on his forehead. It's not my decision, Excellency. These are the rules. The ministry sets them. Without insurance, enough. The word cracked like a whip. Ibrahim's fist slammed against a nearby desk, rattling the clipboard from the man's hands. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. The crowd surged closer, phones raised, broadcasting live. The world was watching. Ibrahim's voice rose thundering now. A nation that lets its teachers and children burn in the street because of papers is a nation without a soul. Applause burst from the crowd. Shouts followed. Let them in, save them, shame on you. The administrator stammered, backing away. But the law. Ibrahim stepped closer, his finger stabbing the air. Then tonight the law changes. He turned to the doctors, their white coats glowing under the harsh light. Some shifted uneasily. One young nurse, tears streaking her face, spoke up. Excellency, if we admit them, we will be punished. Supplies are rationed. We have orders. Ibrahim locked eyes with her. Then hear me clearly. I give the orders now. Silence. Every breath hung heavy. Every camera lens fixed on his face. Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, orders this hospital, every ward, every bed, every ounce of medicine, to open for the victims of tonight's fire, free, without condition, without delay. The crowd erupted, voices crashing like waves, cheers, cries, fists raised in the air. Doctors exchanged nervous glances, but then one stepped forward, an older man, his face lined with years of fatigue. He looked at Awa, at the boy, then at Ibrahim, and he nodded. Prepare the emergency ward. The hall exploded in applause. People wept, hugging strangers. Nurses ran to bring stretchers, oxygen tanks, V-bags. The boy was rushed inside. Awa was lifted gently, her face pale but hopeful. The administrator tried to protest again, voice shaking. You can't just override. Ibrahim turned on him, his words like fire. You would let a blind woman die in the street. You would let a child's breath fade because of a missing card. But I will not. Not tonight. Not ever. The man's mouth snapped shut. He stepped back into the shadows, shamed. As Awa disappeared behind hospital doors, the crowd began chanting, Ibrahim, Ibrahim. Their voices shook the walls, echoing through the city, carried by live streams across the world. Ibrahim stood tall, his chest rising, his face smeared with soot, but his eyes clear as firelight. He raised his hand not in triumph, but in vow. No more walls of paper, no more closed doors. If we must burn down the old system to save one life, then we will. The chant grew louder, and on that night outside a hospital, once ruled by indifference, a movement was born. Hours passed inside the hospital. The smell of antiseptic replaced the acrid smoke of fire. Monitors beeped softly, a steady rhythm against the hush of the night. Outside, the crowd still waited. They refused to leave until they knew. Some prayed. Some whispered stories about what they had witnessed. A leader running into fire. A blind woman carried out alive. A child pulled from death's grip. It felt like legend, but it had happened before their eyes. At last, the doors opened. A doctor stepped out, removing his mask. His face was drawn, tired, but smiling. They are alive. The words rippled through the crowd like thunder. Cheers, tears, applause shaking the very ground. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Men raised their fists in the air. Some simply dropped to their knees in gratitude. Inside, Awa stirred. Her hands trembled against the clean sheets. For years her world had been darkness, but now though she could not see, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Her lips parted. Is it real? Am I still here? The nurse by her side smiled. Yes, Mama, you survived. Awa turned her face toward the sound, and there he was. Ibrahim seated beside her bed, soot still on his skin, his uniform scorched. But his presence was calm, steady, unshaken. Tears welled in her sightless eyes. I thought God forgot me. Her voice cracked. I thought my life ended in that fire. Ibrahim reached forward, taking her hand. No, he said softly. Your story did not end. Tonight it begins again. Her chest rose with a trembling breath. She wept openly now, the weight of years spilling out in each sob. And Ibrahim bowed his head, his own eyes damp. "Thank you," he whispered, "for reminding me why I fight." In the next room, the boy stirred, small lungs filled with air, slow but steady. His eyelids fluttered, and then a weak voice. "Mama," the nurse gasped. "He's awake." When Ibrahim entered, the boy's gaze lifted, confused, afraid. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Ibrahim said gently. "You were in the fire, but you lived because you are strong." The boy blinked, tears slipping down his cheeks. I thought it was the end." Ibrahim knelt, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No, son. Tonight you were given back to the world, and the world is better because you are still here." The boy reached up with trembling fingers, gripping Ibrahim's soot-stained jacket as though holding on to life itself. When the two survivors were wheeled out later, the hospital erupted. People cheered, clapped, wept. Awa raised her face toward the sound. Her lips quivered as she whispered into the air, "Thank you. Thank you, my son." She could not see Ibrahim's bowed head, but the crowd did. They saw their leader kneel beside a blind woman, his forehead bent low, his voice breaking as he said, "No, Mama. Thank you for still believing in us." The applause thundered, nurses cried, strangers embraced. For a moment, the pain of poverty, the scars of fire, the indifference of a broken system, all of it faded. What remained was one truth: life had been restored. The night that began with flames ended with tears of joy. And in the hearts of the people, a conviction burned brighter than any inferno that compassion, when chosen, could rewrite destiny itself. For a brief moment, the city breathed easier. Awa and the boy were alive. The hospital echoed with relief, applause, and prayers. But peace rarely lasts long. 2 nights later, a shadow crept into the ward. The corridors were dim, lit only by the flicker of weak bulbs. Most nurses had dozed in their chairs, exhausted from tending to the fire victims. Awa stirred in her bed. She could not see, but she felt it, the heavy presence of someone standing too close. Her breath caught. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. Just the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. The stranger leaned closer, voice low and sharp. "You should have died in that bus." Her heart pounded. She gripped the blanket tight, trembling. Before she could cry out, the door burst open. 2 guards rushed in, pulling the intruder to the ground. A syringe clattered across the tiles, filled with a clear liquid. The crowd in the hallway awoke with shock. Doctors gasped. The would-be attacker was dragged out shouting curses. "I was paid to finish what the fire could not." Whispers rippled through the hospital. Who would order the killing of a blind woman? Why target a child who had already suffered enough? By dawn, the answer began to surface. Journalists revealed documents linking a corrupt transport official to the attack. He had approved the broken bus's pocketed safety funds and feared exposure now that Awa and the boy had survived. Their voices, their testimony, could destroy him. When Ibrahim heard, his fury was quiet but deadly. He gathered his ministers that morning, slamming the file onto the table. This, he growled, is what indifference becomes when mixed with greed. It doesn't just neglect the poor, it tries to silence them. One minister stammered, "Excellency, the courts." Ibrahim's hand struck the table again. "No more excuses. Justice will not crawl, it will run." By noon, the corrupt official was arrested. The news spread like wildfire. Crowds poured into the streets chanting Ibrahim's name, praising Awa and the boy as symbols of survival. That evening, Ibrahim returned to the hospital. Awa, her voice still weak, asked quietly, "Why do they hate us so much? We are nothing." Ibrahim knelt beside her once more. "No," he said firmly, "you are everything. You carry truth, and truth terrifies those who live on lies." Her lips trembled. For the first time, she smiled faintly, as though the words themselves gave her sight again. The danger had passed, but the message was clear. This was no longer just about fire and survival. It was about corruption, courage, and a fight far larger than one night's blaze. Weeks passed. The smoke of that night faded, but its memory did not. Across Ouagadougou, people still spoke of the fire of the woman who had survived and of the leader who had run into flames. Awa, once invisible on crowded streets, now walked with dignity. She was transferred to a rehabilitation center where teachers trained her in new skills. Her fingers learned the art of weaving threads dancing between her hands, creating patterns brighter than the darkness she carried. Each morning, young children gathered near her chair. Some were orphans. Some had parents too poor to send them to school. Awa, though blind, began teaching again. Her voice recited letters, numbers, songs, the same rhythms she once sang in her village classroom. Her world was dark, but for them, she became a light. One day, as Ibrahim visited quietly, he heard her guiding a child's small hand across a slate. "Feel it?" she whispered. "That is the letter A, the beginning of every story." The boy laughed softly, proud. Ibrahim stood in the doorway unseen, his chest tightening. For him, it was a full circle from fire and despair to knowledge and rebirth. The rescued boy, too, had begun to heal. His burns faded, replaced by shy smiles. Doctors discovered his love for drawing. Given paper and pencils, he sketched houses, buses, trees, and dreams. His little hands, once clenched in fear, now created futures in color. One afternoon, Awa and the boy sat together in the garden. He sketched a sun rising while she traced the texture of the paper with her fingers. "You see for both of us," she said softly. "And together, we will never be blind again." The word spread far, carried by journalists and social media. Soon, the fire survivors became symbols of resilience. They were no longer victims. They were teachers of hope. Ibrahim addressed the nation weeks later. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with conviction. No one will be left behind. Not the blind, not the poor, not the child without a future. Compassion is not charity. It is justice, and justice is what we owe each other. The applause that followed was not just for a president. It was for a promise. As the sun set that evening, Awa sat outside the center. Children gathered around her. The boy held his sketchbook high, showing the others his rising sun. And though she could not see it, Awa smiled, because for the first time in years, she felt it. The world had given her back her dignity. And through her, a new generation was learning what it meant to live again. The evening sky glowed with shades of gold over Ouagadougou. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter soft against the fading light. Awa sat among them, her cane resting by her side, her hands weaving as she taught little ones the rhythm of letters and numbers. Beside her, the rescued boy sketched another rising sun, brighter, bolder than before. Ibrahim stood quietly watching. For a moment, he was not a president. He was a witness to hope reborn. He stepped forward. The children hushed. Awa turned her face toward him. "Excellency," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "Tonight I am only a son, grateful to a mother who teaches us all that no life is too small to save." Then his voice carried over the courtyard. "A nation is not measured by wealth or walls, but by how it saves its weakest from the fire. We will not abandon the blind. We will not forget the poor. As long as we stand together, no one will be left behind." The crowd erupted in applause. Some wept. Some lifted their hands to the sky. And the camera lingered on one last image, Awa's hand resting on the boy's shoulder, the boy's drawing of a rising sun held high, and Ibrahim standing with them framed against the glowing horizon. If this story touched your heart, comment 1. If not, comment 0. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage and compassion.